The Israelis have already de facto annexed Gaza and de facto annexed the West Bank. Their principal goal now is to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians out of those two areas. The idea of ethnically cleansing Greater Israel has been wired into Zionism from the very beginning.
Legendary political scientist John Mearsheimer, the man who co-wrote the book, The Israel Lobby, unfortunately does not believe that the ceasefire in Gaza will hold. And honestly, with some of the latest developments, he has good reason to believe that the ceasefire will not hold, as both sides have already begun to accuse each other of violating the deal. Now, I want to be very precise with our rhetoric and our language when we cover this story. I made a few mistakes yesterday in referring to this as a peace deal. The fact of the matter is there hasn't been a peace deal, I want to say yet, but when it comes to a peace deal, honestly, I don't know if we're ever even going to reach that. So what we're really discussing here is a ceasefire, and the question is whether it's going to hold. Now, unfortunately, there have been more Palestinian deaths in the Gaza Strip at the hands of the IDF. The IDF has, admitted to carrying out some of these acts of violence. So as of this morning, the Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza says that 44 people have been killed and 29 injured in the past 24 hours as a result of Israeli attacks, taking the death toll to 67,913. And according to the Independent, seven Palestinians have been killed after Israeli forces opened fire on suspects. They say approached soldiers near an agreed upon ceasefire line in northern Gaza. So look, we have no way of confirming that. And if I had to bet money on it, I would not in any way trust what the IDF has to say. I also wouldn't just trust what Hamas has to say. But the idea that you shouldn't kill 7 people simply because they're approaching you. Remember, Palestinians are unarmed. Why is that the first response? To just shoot and kill 7 people right there on the spot, but they have confessed to that. Now, an Israeli drone strike also killed 5 people as they returned to check on their homes in Gaza's eastern Shijaya neighborhood, according to authorities. A separate strike killed 1 person and injured another near Khan Yunis. Now, if you guys can remember from our coverage yesterday, I talked a little bit about how Israel agreed that they would no longer carry out during the ceasefire any offensive military operations, that they would only carry out defensive military operations. And so the argument that they're going to make moving forward is every Palestinian that the IDF kills posed a threat. They did what they did because they were just defending themselves. But I also want to remind you all that they're still not allowing international journalists into the Gaza Strip where maybe some investigative reporting can confirm which side is telling the truth, which side is lying. And it's a terrible situation. Now, on top of that, there's the issue of the deceased hostages and the fact that Hamas has not returned all of the remains of the deceased hostages. So look, prior to the ceasefire, Hamas was in possession of the remains of 26 deceased hostages. So far, say that again, Cenk?
I think it's 28, Anna.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
I'm sorry. The Guardian said 26 today, but okay, that's fine. So, all right, let's go with 28. It doesn't matter. They haven't released the remains of every deceased hostage, and that has upset the Palestinians. But there's nuance in this part of the story that I want to talk a little bit about. Now, they've returned the remains of 4 of the deceased hostages. There are reports that they are planning on returning 4 more deceased hostages later tonight. So we'll wait and see if that happens. However, it's really, really important to keep in mind that if you look at the ceasefire deal that was signed by the 2 parties, right? This is the first stage of the ceasefire. There was an agreement that, look, it's going to be difficult to locate the remains of all of these deceased hostages. Some of them are buried under the rubble, for instance. And so as part of this deal in writing, it was agreed upon that Hamas might need a little more extra time to do what they are agreeing to do in returning all of the hostages, including the remains of the deceased. Families of deceased hostages, though, who are supposed to be returned to Israel as part of President Trump's 20-point plan for peace, said that they were angered that only 4, and you're right, Cenk, 4 of the 28 bodies had been returned. And the Hostages Families Forum, which is an advocacy group for the hostages and the hostage families, of course, called the failure to hand over all the bodies a violation of the agreement and called for the immediate suspension of all agreement implementation until all the remaining bodies are returned to Israel. Now, that's pretty disastrous, but I think that's the first piece of evidence we can point to when we say that the protests about ending the war wasn't really about the plight of the Palestinian people. It was really about releasing all the hostages. What happens to the Palestinians, I don't think, the hostage families really care too much about, but whatever, putting that aside, a spokesperson for the forum later said that it wasn't calling for a return to fighting, but for Hamas to be held accountable to meet its obligations as part of the agreement. But they are so far meeting the obligations as part of their agreement. As Jeremy Scahill reports, during Gaza negotiations, Israel understood it would take time to recover all bodies of deceased captives. A specific mechanism for recovering the bodies was agreed. Now Israel is pretending that didn't happen so it can violate the deal and cut the agreed aid shipments in half. And in fact, that is what is happening. Israel had initially agreed to allow 600 aid trucks into the Gaza Strip. Now they're saying, okay, well, since Hamas allegedly hasn't fulfilled its promise, which again, they are trying to find the remains of the hostages, and they are actually following through with the agreement based on what's in writing. We're gonna go ahead and do collective punishment and severely limit the aid that enters the Gaza Strip. And so that's what we're dealing with now. Red Cross spokesperson Christian Cardone told reporters in Geneva that not all entry points are open to get humanitarian aid inside Gaza. And that's the main issue right now. And that's what humanitarians, including the ICRC, have been calling for in the last hours, is making sure that because of the huge needs, all entry points can be open. We are still witnessing only a few trucks coming in and large crowds approaching these trucks in a way that does absolutely not conform to humanitarian standards. And the coordinator of government activities in the territories, COGAT, the Israeli military body overseeing aid flows, said the restrictions were being imposed because, quote, Hamas violated the agreement. Again, they didn't. You can read the agreement yourselves. Regarding the release of the bodies of the hostages, no fuel or gas will be permitted except for specific humanitarian infrastructure needs, the note added. And if you guys can also remember, Cenk, yesterday we were talking about how as soon as the bombing stopped, Palestinians started looking for the remains of their family members under the rubble, but it's really hard to do it because they don't have the heavy machinery necessary to get through, heavy rubble. And so they're using pickaxes, they're making do with what they have, they're using their bare hands. But if in fact you have the remains of hostages buried under the rubble, Israel can help by allowing the heavy machinery into the territory so they can, get through the rubble and find the remains of, yes, the Israeli hostages, but also innocent Palestinians who have been trapped under the rubble for who knows how long.
Yeah, so it's funny you were saying that right as one of our members wrote in, Impeach for Peace said, we won't provide you with equipment to remove the rubble, but you broke the peace deal by not giving us hostages buried under the rubble. Well, how are we supposed to get them, right? So that's a great point by one of our members. Embedded Dude, another member on TYT.com said, one dead Israeli hostage is worth 10,000 Palestinian people. When it comes to American media, I think that is literally true. We're gonna talk about that in a second. And last member, and we do the show together with our members, so sign up now if you can, hit the join button below, etc. Wang Jun said, Israel violating the ceasefire is the biggest we told you so since the last time Israel violated a ceasefire. So now, let me break it down a little bit further. So there was 20 hostages that remained alive, 28 that were dead, right? So they returned the 20 that are alive. That's the most important thing, and I'm thrilled that those guys are back. We covered on the show yesterday, the moms, dads, girlfriends, wives in tears, and super understandable, and thank God they're back. The dead are important to the family members. I understand that. So had 28 left. They returned 4 initially. They're returning 4 tonight. So there's 20 left that are dead. But Hamas had already explained to Israel and the other people involved in the peace negotiations that they don't necessarily have them and they need to find them. In fact, I'm going to add on to what Anna said with a part I found from the Wall Street Journal. But you have to understand something, and this is important. These pieces of information are buried in mainstream media articles like the deceased are buried under the rubble in Gaza. So I read half a dozen articles before I finally found this information on the 5th page of a Wall Street Journal article, okay? So they say, quote, Hamas had communicated to mediators that it didn't know where all the bodies were, and the 2 sides agreed to set up an international task force to search for the remaining bodies. So Hamas has definitively not broken the deal. Now, did you see that on cable news? Did you see that as a headline anywhere? No, what I have read and seen all over mainstream media is Hamas breaks the deal, they had it coming. Hamas breaks the deal, Hamas breaks it. You're lying, you're literally lying. Or you're ignorant buffoons who are actors reading a script that your producer wrote for you and your producer is lying. You ignorant buffoons, this is important. Get it right for the first time in your lives. But nope, they're all gonna lie on behalf of Israel. And then when we say, hey, it looks like you're working for Israel, they're like, how dare you, you anti-Semite. Of course we're gonna lie on behalf of Israel. Well, then you're not news. And by the way, I say go to Israel, but Israel has way better press than we have here. Israeli press holds the Israeli government accountable way more than American press does. So now we get to how Israel is violating the deal. So look, guys, I thought it was 53% because that's what I was reading in the past. Now they're clarifying, no. Israel currently occupies 58% of Gaza. So they already stole more than half of Gaza. They're never gonna give it back. They're never gonna withdraw. Everyone who isn't stupid knows that, or ignorant, right? Well, to be fair, most are in the ignorant category. And if you're accidentally ignorant because you watch cable news or you read the New York Times, I don't blame you, right? They're just purposely lying to you over and over and over again on behalf of their beloved Israel. So they already stole all that land. And if I'm wrong and they withdraw completely, oh my God, of course I'll come out and tell you. You know why? Because I'm in the news business where we actually report things, whether it's favorable or unfavorable to our point of view. Unlike the mainstream media who hide facts from you. All right, so in this case, they say the 5 unarmed Palestinians approached the yellow line. So you have begun to approach the area of Gaza we stole from you earlier by murdering your family members. That's it, kill them all. Because we told you they were never gonna stop killing. And because the American government keeps writing them checks. Oh, you murdered more Palestinians. You violated Trump's ceasefire. Who cares? Write them another check, write them another check. And American media, oh, Israel, Israel, the Palestinian dirty savages, right? I'm so sick of our disgustingly racist media that it constantly smearing Palestinians. And of course, Israel cut all the aid in half, as Anna told you. So they're back to murdering, they're back to starving. Day one, we told you this government of Israel is a terrorist government. They're never gonna stop murdering the Palestinians. They're never gonna stop stealing their land and trying to create greater Israel. And they say it, they say they want greater Israel, and that includes Gaza as the West Bank. The only reason why that's not crystal clear to everyone in America is because the American media absolutely refuses to tell you what the Israeli government officials actually say. Like, for example, did you read everywhere? Did you see on cable news that Netanyahu said in Hebrew, as we reported yesterday? Oh, the campaign's not over. He has no intention of listening to Trump's peace plan. None, zero. He said it. He said he's on a spiritual and historical mission to capture greater Israel, which includes Gaza and the West Bank. But the American media will lie on behalf of Netanyahu 2,000 times over and do their stupid propaganda as they go back to their genocide immediately. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.